Let's bring in right now the senior writer for The Dispatch and columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, David Drucker. He has new reporting. I couldn't agree with more. He's like, don't confuse the Iran war MAGA critics with most Republicans. David, thank you for writing this piece. Because Meek and I had this conversation yesterday. She said, oh, well, John Thune supporting this war. I'm surprised that I said, Mika, there are so many things that Republicans have done that have distorted their conservative viewpoints and worldviews. This is not one of them. Since 1979, conservatives have wondered why America hasn't been tougher on this terrorist regime. Of course, we can all debate the reasons why
that was more my question.
We went in the wrong way. We should have. Yeah, that was
reasoning.
That was more Mika's question, and the reasoning. We can debate all of that, but explain to viewers that how people like me that came of age in 1979 and saw the Iranians holding our people hostage, saw the Iranians killing our Marines in Beirut, saw the Iranians killing Americans at Khobar, so that really we can be twisted up about how Donald Trump is going about doing this, but not that Khomeini is gone and this regime is being rooted up.
Yeah, Joe and Mika, it's such a good point. You know, one of the arguments that so many Republicans had with Donald Trump as he sort of rose within the Republican Party in 2015 and 2016 is that he didn't believe in projecting American power abroad, concerns that he disfavored a muscular American foreign policy that was willing to use the military when Republicans felt it was warranted. It was such a part of Reagan Republicanism. And to your point about how seminal Iran and its regime has been to Republican foreign policy thinking, you go back, and this is even true, for me as a young kid watching this. One of my first political memories is the '79 revolution in Iran. American hostages are taken, and how captivating that was for the American public and for many Republicans during the 1980 campaign. And Walter Cronkite would famously close out his news broadcast every evening marking, and that's the way it is, and this many days for the hostages in Iran. And this feeling among Republicans that it was the originator of the peace through strength slogan, which was really designed to take on the Soviet Union, that it was that projected strength that forced the regime in Tehran to release the American hostages. Now, there's a lot more to it than that in the hindsight of history, but that was a large part of it, and certainly for many Republicans. So fast forward, you get to this, and you have so many Republicans, voters as well as Republicans in Washington, who are saying to themselves, after almost 50 years of diplomacy that hasn't worked, and it's good that we tried it, there's an argument for this, and I'm glad he's doing it, and it's something I can support. A lot of us are watching the very loudest voices, which these days are magnified on social media, something that, didn't exist until relatively recently. And these seem to be the loudest voices. And they're not insignificant because they are part of this broader coalition that Donald Trump created that in particular helped him return to the White House in 2024. And if you want to look ahead to 2028, Donald Trump's a unique figure. He won't be on the ballot. It could cause Republicans problems in terms of their desire to recreate this coalition without him. In fact, it could cause them problems in 2026 because the stated policy strategy from Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, is to put Trump on the road and recreate that 2024 coalition, turning out for other Republicans. But if you want to look at where the breadth of the party is on this war right now, it's supportive. And according to my sources, and I checked with pollsters I trust and strategists, that includes Republican voters that identify with the MAGA movement specifically. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that if they want to understand the politics of this inside the party.
Yeah, and Willie, the overwhelming number of Republicans are going to support this for all the reasons that David talked about. And he's right. It was an era-defining moment for those of us that came of age, 79, the hostage crisis. Ronald Reagan running in 1980. But we do hear loud voices, you know, the sort of the loudest voices on social media. And it's very easy to look at that and go, well, this is where the heart of the Republican Party is. No, it's not. I mean, it's an important part of the Republican Party. It was when I got there in 1994 to be skeptical of foreign engagements. And there's a long history of sort of this Taft American firstism, this isolationism. And that strain still runs down the side of the Republican Party. But, man, I don't think anybody should make any mistake thinking that rank-and-file Republicans are somehow offended that Donald Trump has gone into Iran, because they're just not.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting that one distinction, David, to make is that this president, over campaigns in 2016, 2020, and again in 2024, always talked about not getting America involved in what he called stupid wars, thinking about Iraq and Afghanistan going on for too long, and criticizing both Republican and Democratic presidents for the way they got into wars and then got out of them in the case of Joe Biden. So is there any blowback among his supporters, among MAGA supporters, to the fact that he promised to be an America First president, that we've heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene in the last week or so, going out very vocally and saying this is not what MAGA voted for. Focus on what's going on at home. Focus on immigration. Don't get us tied up in these long wars. Is there any criticism and blowback on that point?
Well, there is, and it is happening in sort of the strongest quadrant of the MAGA base, if you will. Not the entirety of the MAGA base, but particularly online from influencers and from current and former Republican politicians that are populist in their nature and were attracted to Trump for these particular reasons. And as I mentioned, it could cause Republicans problems going forward, with the coalition that they hope to recreate in the next couple of elections. I'd also point out that part of the problem the president is having here, that you guys have talked about a lot, but it's important, is he hasn't made a case in the months leading up to this, the way previous presidents would have, that gives people something to hang their hat on. And to the point about how this plays overseas, he's not making a case. And it's something, when I interviewed George Shultz about 10 years ago, before he had died, he said that Ronald Reagan always understood that the foreign leaders he was dealing with in the West had voters too, right? And there has to be more of a concern for how people think about this, rather than just execute using power because you have it, if you want people to not just be on board on day one, but day 100. And it's something where the president often gets himself into trouble. And I have voters telling me, I can appreciate the underlying policy. I think he may have a point, but he's not explaining it well. I don't get it. And the execution seems like it's not working. And, this is where you have, if he's going to keep this coalition together and assuage the critics, he's going to have to do that. The thing is, he doesn't do what he doesn't do, and he just doesn't do this.
All right, David Drucker, stay with us. We want to get your take on the results out of the Texas primary. A lot ahead to talk about. We're also going to speak with...
David just described Donald Trump. We should put it on a bumper sticker. He doesn't do what he doesn't do because he doesn't do what he doesn't do. And he doesn't do it.
Okay.
That does explain
that would be it.